Hi everyone, for today's lesson we're going to be focusing on creating a database and some tables in SQL Server. And if you haven't gotten a chance to install SQL Server, feel free to review the link. I'll add it to the video description and to the video if you want to install it. And basically what we're going to be using is called a relational database in SQL Server. So it's, a relational database is a type of database that stores and provides access to data points that are related to one another. In our example, we're going to create two simple databases, a customer and an order table. And this is how the tables are going to look. So we're going to have a customer table, and it's going to have a customer ID, first name, last name, date of birth, and status. And the order table is going to have an order ID, and then the customer ID, which is going to be the foreign key that's going to connect back to the customer's table. A ship date, SLA, and complete a field called completed, which is going to be a 0 for 1 for completed and a 0 for not being completed. And right now, these are going to be two simple tables that we're going to be using over the next video. So maybe we'll improve on them or add more fields later. But for now, I just wanted to keep them simple so we can write functions on them and also combine them to write some queries too. Now let's head over to SSMS and connect to our instance. So this is the instance that we're connecting to. Click connect. And let's load all our databases. And this is a test DB that we created on the last video, but let's create a new one for people that haven't watched that video. And for now, leave everything as is. Let's just call it store. Click OK. So as you can see, our new database has loaded, but in case you don't see it, right click here and click refresh. So now let's create the tables that we mentioned. So right click, or click the plus sign. So now on tables, you can right click and click on new table. So this will be the customer table. The first column is going to be customer ID. So you have the option to allow nulls or not. So by default it doesn't allow, so if you check it, it does allow nulls. For this one we want it to be an int. First name, and for this one we said it was going to be a varchar. You can specify the size. I think 50 should be fine for first name. Last name. Varchar as well. We can probably make this, let's say, 75 characters. And you want to now allow nulls for now, or let's make it a requirement. Everybody has a name. Now date of birth, DOB, and this is going to be a date type. Status. Status is when they open, let's say, the account. So by default, later on, we're gonna create what is called a store procedure and set it to active right away. And I'll show you once we insert data what I mean. So let's do varchar as well. I don't think we need 50 characters, so let's say 35. So now click close, click yes. So now when you close it, then it's gonna ask you for the table name. Let's call this customer. And feel free to call it customers, it's up to you. I'm just gonna call it customer. Click OK. See, so now do refresh here or click here. So there's our table. And part of the DBO, that's the schema that is from. So we'll talk about that later, but the default one that SQL Server assigns to is the DBO. Just remember that, but your table name is customer. So now let's create the order table. The first column is going to be OrderID, int, second one CustomerID, which is this is going to be our foreign key, ShipDate, for ShipDate, let's do a datetime. And I'll expand about it why sometimes doing a datetime is better than doing just a date field, especially with all the functions that SQL Server has to offer. SLA, let's do this in int, and that will represent days. So now complete it. And as I mentioned in our video, we're going to be using 0 and 1 to represent if the order has been completed. And close out like we did before. Click yes. Name your table, order or orders. Click OK. So now we have our orders here. Now what you can do, you can add data with edit 200 rows, but honestly I don't like this view. It's very troublesome. I'm just gonna copy and paste a query on the insert statements. So what you're gonna do on the table, on the database that you're on, you're gonna right click and do new query. And I'm just gonna copy some insert statements and I'll go over them. So these are standard insert statements. So this is what it means. You're gonna insert into table name, which is customer, values, and over here is gonna follow the order, and it has to follow the orders exactly. Because if you don't, if you enter like an int or a character in an int field, you're gonna get an error. So SQL Server knows that they're expecting an int, so the order does matter when you're inserting. And for dates, remember SQL Server has a function that reads the date input as strings. That's why you see it as strings. That's why we have to put in the single quotes at the end. So just be aware of that too for any date type. So let's run. What you can do, if you are to click execute, it's gonna run all of these insert statements, or you can highlight them too. What you can also do, if you just want to insert one for now, do this. And here we go. Let's see. Let's click on column, see if I have the order. So it's order ID, first name, last name, status. Let me see. So one thing I did notice is that we're in the TestDB database. So all this is incorrect. So instead of us going and using the interface, let's do something quick. Let's have SQL Server write that script for us that will create this table again. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna right click, script table as, create to, and just click a new query editor window. And you do the same for order. But now see where it says use, remove this, because this is gonna take the same. What we can do is update this to say store. So let's run this command, and now because we inserted them incorrectly in the testDB, so let's delete them. So when you want to delete a table, click delete. And remember, this is your server, so feel free to make mistakes, don't worry about it. So now when we use that word use, it's telling SQL Server to go to this database, and now it should create it here instead of the testDB that it was created incorrectly by me. So from here, let's create new query window. And I'm gonna copy the insert statements again and see now that we're in the correct database. Let me try to run this now. Okay, so it's getting the same issue. Let's see. Let's change this to nvarchar and see if that makes it if that helps out. Click the X and click yes. Okay, so it's saying that we cannot make these changes, we're gonna have to drop them. So we're gonna do the same thing with that. So let's delete them. And let's go back to our insert statement. So here let's say nvarchar. Okay, I see here. See, our issue was var binary. So let's change it to nvarchar. So I think that was the issue that it was letting us know. So this is why it's helpful to save it as a script. That way you can improve on it and don't have to go back to the editor each time. So let's try to run that insert statement again. There we go. We were able to insert into the table. Second insert statement. But now let's notice something. So when you want to do a select from the table, you do select asterisk, or I'm gonna call it, I usually call it star, from table name, which is customer. So when you do this, this is gonna give you all the records. But you see how we have customer ID and it's the same customer ID but different names? In the real world, you don't want this to happen. So in order for us to create a better table, let's delete this. So we want to implement the customer ID to be unique. So for our sake, let's delete this table first. So let's refresh here so we can see the tables. Let's drop it or delete it. Okay. So now here, let's go back to our insert statement. So what you can do, you can specify. So you're gonna say now, well, you can tell it that it's gonna be your primary key. So you can add it as a comma. So customer ID is gonna be our primary key. And also identity, what identity does is instead of us entering the customer ID, SQL Server will do it for us. So it's saying that it's going to increment it by 1 each time a record gets inserted. So let's try now and run this. So it ran successfully, right? So now let's do the same insert statements that we did before. See, before we had 2 customer IDs with the number of 1, which in the real world that will cause a lot of headaches. So we wanna remove those headaches. So let's try to insert it now. Okay. Since we have identity insert on, we are no longer required to add the customer ID field. It will do it for us. There we go. So now we can delete these fields. And now let's run this insert statement for the others. And now let's do a select statement. So there we go. Now we didn't have to worry about the customer ID. SQL Server did it for us. And I don't know if I forgot to create the orders table, because I wasn't sure if this was causing the issue, but let's create it back again. Okay, I created the table. And let me get the insert statements for that table. Let me check the table name. I think over here, order, I think it's a reserved word. I may have to add an S. So now we're gonna have to delete the table, the orders table again. So now let's go back over here and add an S. So what we didn't do, we didn't turn on the identity column or created a primary key either here. So let's see if we can update it. So set as primary. So now let's go over here. Identity specification, click yes. So for now, let's add a 1 to it. And this will be 2. And let's try to add these 3 records. There we go. So that's what we were missing. We didn't set the identity to set a column to as identity to increase it for us. Usually this one, oh here it is, it's identity. Let me try to change it to yes. There we go. So now by me changing it to yes, so here it is, identity increment by 1, identity seed is 1. So now we should be able to run the other statements without having us to insert the primary key. So let's try it. And I think it's because we haven't saved that yet. So let's save it. And we can turn off this feature, I'll show you later, but for now we're not able to. So we might have to do the same thing. So we might have to delete this table. So this is the orders table, okay? So here, identity, 1 of 1. So we'll increment it by 1. Primary key. Let's say order ID like we did. And let's run it again. Okay. So now let's delete these numbers here that I entered before. Let's highlight them all and run it. There we go. We were able to insert all the records. So let's do a select statement. From the table name, which is orders, there we go. So here are all the records. And if you notice, since this is a datetime field, if you don't specify a time, by default it's gonna be 0. But this is fine. Later on, when we have a video dedicated to dates, I'll show you how to filter the data. So you can use the where clause here. So where, and you can specify how you want to filter it. Let's say by orders from the customer ID. So you're gonna say where the field that you want to filter by. So it's gonna be customer ID. Equals, let's say 1. There we go. So that's another way that you can start filtering data. So let's try for all the orders that have been completed. So completed equals 1. And remember, I'm only highlighting what I want to run. So I only highlight this, so this means that only this is gonna be executed. Because by mistake, if I run this again without highlighting nothing and press execute, it's gonna run all this SQL statements. So just be aware of that, how this is run. But for now, at least, hopefully the errors that I did also help you create your first table, or if you have any issues, hopefully they were familiar to mine, and I show you a way how to resolve it. And what I'm gonna do, I'm also gonna try to provide the scripts that SQL Server created for me, so that way if you run into issues, you can run the script to create the tables and the insert statements that I showed. And feel free to ask me any questions in the comment sections, and thank you for watching.